Recent astrology, especially Mercury, has now turned direct in the sky here on February 11th. Mercury had been retrograde since the end of January, like around January 20th or so. And so Mercury is now moving forward. Now it's actually like on the 12th, on February 12th, here on the 11th and the 12th, it's kind of what's called stationary direct. So it still kind of feels a bit stuck, but we can feel a change of direction that's happened maybe with some things that have felt stuck. But, you know, the last couple days, especially of this week, with the moon being hemmed between Rahu and Saturn, and then joins Saturn, which is where it's going to be on the 13th, on the 12th and 13th, it's definitely felt a little bit like, you know, we're sort of stuck and sort of sandwiched and sort of crunched between some real sort of pressure, you know. And so with Mercury turning direct, though, it really helps to bring some flexibility and some lightheartedness into that whole process and make us, you know, give us this feeling that some things are moving forward. Some very interesting things in the news lately that really reflect this Jupiter retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and now Mercury moving forward. You know, a couple news events that really stood out, especially on the 11th. Number one is, you know, and these are mainly United States news. Some of it is world news though as well. But there's a very popular show here called The Daily Show. A guy named Jon Stewart. It's a political talk show. He announced on Wednesday, February 11th, that he was going to be leaving the show. Actually, I think it was on a show on the 10th. It was that night, but it became news actually on the 10th and the 11th. So as Mercury moves forward, you know, he was probably thinking about it, and he made the announcement to move forward and change direction. And the other thing that happened is there was this big scandal in the news with this newsman named Brian Williams, it was revealed that he was lying about news stories in the Gulf War and also in the Hurricane Katrina, where he exaggerated what happened, which is really not good. I mean, you can't exaggerate, especially in a very dramatic fashion. He said that when he was covering the Gulf War, his helicopter was hit by, rocket-propelled grenades. It was RPGs. I wanted to make sure that was the right acronym, which means rocket-propelled grenades, and also maybe, rifle fire, automatic rifle fire. But none of that actually happened. Instead, he was a couple choppers behind. He also had said some things like in Hurricane Katrina, when he covered that, he had said that from his apartment in the French Quarter, you could see bodies floating by, which is a rather sensational claim considering that the water never got that deep. Many people refuted that possibility and that claim. So, you know, one of the things that a newsman can't afford is to have his honesty in question. So NBC News fired him, suspended him for 6 months also here on, it was on Tuesday and Wednesday. This has been news of the day, Tuesday and Wednesday here in the United States. So two things that have to do with the news and people who guide us, newsmen, entertainers. I said this several weeks ago when Jupiter was retrograde and I started getting into Jupiter and what Jupiter is. And I said it's not just priests and, these ancient categories. We have to evolve our idea of what Jupiter is. They're people that guide us and inspire us and lead us. And in many ways, in this modern world, a lot of those guides are like entertainers. You can clearly see it with someone who reports the news. Very Jupiterian figure where we have to trust that what he's saying is true, right? And that's very much a Jupiter thing. We trust them. We trust our teachers. We trust our guides. We trust those people to guide us and not mislead us to make themselves look good or whatever his motivation. Probably just telling a little war story, exaggerating a little bit, right? To make himself, look like he's more important than he is, or that he was more in danger than he was, or just to make himself seem like he's more, in harm's way and more in danger than he was. But again, this is a very Jupiterian figure. Excuse me, eye itching a little bit. And again, Mercury was also going retrograde at the same time, which has to do with, the tales we tell, the things we say, our words. And again, our words, in contrast to the bigger picture, when Mercury is weak, we have a tendency to exaggerate. And I said this a couple weeks ago. This is why Mercury is debilitated in Jupiter's signs, or in Jupiter's sign, the sign of Pisces, because Mercury is where we're correct and we're accurate with our words, and we convey what's accurate. I'm going to do a case study on Brian Williams' chart, but he actually has debilitated Mercury. And so, but this connection between Mercury and Jupiter can really show where, in its glory and in its, creative, the creative option is that we're looking at our teachers with an eye toward discrimination and making sure that the teachers and the teachings make sense. And one way we know that our teachers and teachings make sense to us is we can explain them, and we explain them clearly. Like if you can't explain something that you believe in, explain Mercury, believe in Jupiter, then you don't really understand it. You don't really comprehend it. It's just a belief. You can see how well someone comprehends something by how clearly they can explain it. When someone can't explain something clearly, then they don't really understand it. They might believe in it, but then when they go to explain it, it sounds dumb, for lack of a better way to put it. And I'm saying this especially for people who believe in astrology. A lot of people who believe in astrology, you ask them to explain what it is, and they sound silly because they don't really understand it. They don't understand what it is. You've probably heard me talk about this quite a lot, and people don't like when I say that a lot of the time. They think I'm being elitist or judgmental. I'm not. I'm just stating a fact, like anything else. Something that you really understand, you can explain it well, relative to whatever your standard is of well. Some people are more articulate than others, but it's still, you have a standard of comprehension and a standard of being clear. And so when you understand something, you can explain it clearly. That's when Mercury and Jupiter are really working well. When they're not, then we're confusing the details, we're exaggerating, we might be flat out lying. It's all part of the same thing for all kinds of reasons, maybe for silly reasons. There's no reason for him to tell those little fibs, except for he just thought it was fun or something, to make himself look bigger than he was, so that we would think, oh wow, he's really more inspiring than he is, Jupiter stuff. So he tells these little white lies. So this is a thing that happened literally with Brian Williams, who was literally like a serious news figure and a serious guide here in the US. Jon Stewart, he's actually no less serious and no less respected. In that show, The Daily Show, he kind of mocks the conservative establishment here in the United States with our news cycle, and he's very well respected, and especially now entertainers are very much Jupiterian figures, and especially those who mix entertainment with political and social commentary. They're very Jupiterian figures now. Jon Stewart is a big one here in the United States, but you can look at ones like John Lennon, right? Even George Carlin. What's his name? That nutty comedian from England, Russell Brand. He's becoming a very Jupiterian figure. He's a comedian, but he's talking about serious issues. So these are all Jupiter, Mercury figures. So again, it's poignant that as Mercury turns direct, Jupiter still retrograde, we saw a change in direction with two Mercury-Jupiter type figures. Brian Williams loses his gig in disgrace. Jon Stewart decides to go in a new direction and makes that announcement. There was also a very important announcement here in the US where our President Barack Obama, also in sort of changing direction in policy, decided to declare a kind of formal aggression pact against that ISIS, he calls it ISIL, that militant Islamic organization. He went to Congress to seek a formal sort of declaration of war. First time that's happened in like 13 years. Again, it's a change of posture and a different type of rhetoric from a leader, which is what Obama is. There's also been all kinds of rhetoric around the Ukrainian situation with the fighting and skirmishes recently that broke out in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine and the political fallout there. A lot of Jupiter, Mercury things coming to a head, and we're going to see these things start to move forward again. Notice how that has been taking place in your life as well. Now that Mercury is moving forward, it's a time for you to start moving forward and making up your mind about some things that have been confusing for the last couple months, especially since Jupiter went retrograde. So ponder that.